Welcome to the Broncos Podcast with Troy Renck. I am your host, Troy Renck from the Denver Post. Hope you're having a wonderful start of your week. Feels like spring, even though it's been chilly. It's baseball weather. No thanks to the Rockies. They make us want to hate baseball within the first two series of the season, but that's kind of what we expected, if we're being honest. Huge weekend for college sports. CU secures Coach Prime on a 5-year, $54 million revised contract. Are you kidding me? Doubling his salary? They didn't have money to pay for the first one at 29. Where's that money coming from? I don't know, but it keeps CU relevant. CSU gets their guy in Alley to take over the Hoops program. And, of course, DU hockey. Got to throw a shout-out to my Pios. Hoping to be out there this week to talk to some of those players. Look to try to win back-to-back titles. They advance with the upset over Boston College, so they're back in the Frozen Four. That'll be in St. Louis next week. Not this week, next week. They take a week off, so they're not going up against the men's and women's hoops. So huge weekend for college sports, but you listen to this podcast for Broncos. And there's news. There's some meat on the bone, folks. The NFL owners' meetings are going on in Palm Beach. I got Parker Gabriel there as my correspondent from the Denver Post, keeping me informed. Dave Althouse from Fox 31 getting me some audio so you can get a feel for what Sean Payton was saying. It's a wonderful time to talk to a coach in a little more of a relaxed setting. You'd never know it with the way Mike Tomlin was talking to the media yesterday. It looked like he had just run a triathlon, sweating it out inside a breakfast lobby. But Sean Payton addressed several topics, including and most notably his free agent signings for the first time this offseason. So I want you to guys hear that audio, how he thinks these players are going to fit, how they're balancing the injury risk. Broncos had a terrific offseason, still work to do, and again, they're getting closer, folks. I wrote on Sunday, and I'd like you to read this if you have a chance in the Denver Post. If the Broncos get the right running back in the draft, they could pass the Kansas City Chiefs. That's how close I think they are to the Chiefs. One, Broncos are improving significantly if healthy, and B, the Chiefs are starting to regress to the mean a little bit. Just enough. And you saw that last year, that gap starting to close. With the right running back, the Broncos could pass the Chiefs. I'll see what you guys think. We're going to get to all of that and Sean Payton at the NFL owners' meetings after the break. Have you been hurt in a car wreck or injured at work? What are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hoggatt Injury Law a call. Their motto, with us, it's personal. Listen, it is. I've known Darby Hoggatt forever. We grew up watching our kids play baseball. We traveled the country. I became Darby's good friends. That's how it is with him. Many of his clients become his good friend. You don't even have to pay Darby up front. If your case goes as planned, Darby will be the one writing checks to you. So again, if you've been hurt in a car wreck or injured at work, give Darby a call. His team's at 1-833 HOGGATT. That's 1-833-HOGGAT, or visit the website at hoggattlaw.com. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all sports betting action. The Final Four is here, and BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are going on. With the largest selection of odds on everything from college hoops to MLB, NHL, and UFC, even the Kentucky Derby and NFL season futures, they're all ready for you to bet at BetOnline. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline. The game starts here. Welcome back to the Broncos Pod. This is Troy Renck. Broncos country, I hope you're having a wonderful offseason. I would think you are. If you're reading the Denver Post, where I'm at, you're reading it with Parker Gabriel and Luca Evans, I think you're realizing how much this team is narrowing the gap, how much they're pushing to get to that, if not championship level, certainly to where they could win an AFC title. And that's the clearest path, folks, to a bye. If not a bye, that's the clearest way to host a home game, to give yourself a better chance in the playoffs. Because going on the road to the Buffalo, I mean, there could not have been a worse matchup other than maybe the Broncos going on the road to Baltimore. You want to stay out of those games. And how you stay out of those games at the end of the season, in some ways, is predicated by what you do in the offseason. And the Broncos have had a strong offseason. As you all know, they signed Dre Greenlaw, the linebacker, Talanoa Hufanga, the safety, and, of course, Evan Ingram. And if you've read the Denver Post, you read my stuff, you read Parker and Luca, you've got a feel for what these players mean. But what does Sean Payton think about these players? That's more important. And again, I told you a few weeks ago, Vance Joseph was explaining to me that it was the fit with Talanoa and with Dre Greenlaw. It was the fit, not just the player. It was the fit in the scheme. Evan Ingram, we know, joker traits. It's not just, we need a tight end, go get a tight end. And that's where they are right now. And, folks, they're becoming a preferred destination. I wrote a few weeks ago, the Broncos are becoming the Broncos again. The Broncos are acting like the Broncos again. I covered them in 97, 98 when they won back-to-back Super Bowls. They were a destination location. Now you're seeing some of that come back with the culture change, with the winning, with the team being back on prime time. Just a lot of things are starting to shift. And no more was that evident than in the pursuit of Dre Greenlaw. And I encourage you to read Luca Evans' story in the Denver Post about this. But the Niners wanted him back. They identified this offseason a core of players they were going to move forward with. They were letting several go, trading them, Deebo Samuel, multiple offensive linemen. They're trying to kind of trim some of the fat, admit some mistakes, if you will, and the way they've, when you make a Super Bowl run, you're going to get a little bloated with some contracts. You're going to have some older players that you're prepared to move on from. But Dre Greenlaw was not one of them. And Luke Evans does a nice job in talking to family members of Greenlaw of how Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch flew out to Dallas to try to prevent Greenlaw from signing, because he had agreed in principle with the Broncos, but nothing becomes official till Wednesday. They fly out to Dallas. The story goes, and again, some of it's probably the story of legend, but like they're ready to block his driveway so he can't get out. But it wouldn't prevent him from signing, I suppose. But they were that eager to try to get him to flip, almost like a college recruiter. I know you've agreed orally and verbally to this. What about giving us one last pitch? The problem with that is you had all season to sign him. Kyle Shanahan said Tuesday at the NFL owners meetings that, well, the reason it didn't get done is we had so many other priorities, things that we were trying to get off this checklist. And that's true. But then don't be upset when the player's like mentally he's moved on. He's seeing that he's not the number one priority. And he sees the fit because he's really good friends with Talanoa Hufanga and says, maybe it's time for a fresh start. And so when you get to his house, everything you're saying about the San Francisco 49ers, he believes. He's lived it. He's helped establish your culture. But at that point, it sounded like he was ready to move on. He had already made his mind up that it was kind of time for him to hit the reset button somewhere else. So it just tells you how badly they wanted him, that they fly old school free agency. Last time I remember that was when the Red Sox flew to Kurt Schilling to orchestrate a trade to keep him away from the Yankees. That was over Thanksgiving, where the Red Sox folks had Thanksgiving dinner, I think, at the Schillings to keep him. This wasn't that. But this does tell you, anytime you get executives and a coach on a plane in the professional level, how important it was they keep Greenlaw. They could not. That tells you where the Broncos are, folks. People are starting to identify. And they've got multiple 49ers here with DJ Jones, with Mike McGlinchey. I mean, you've got guys here that they're comfortable with. And more than anything, it's the scheme. It's the scheme. Evan Ingram, old school free agency. He's leaving. He sees your place. He goes to the Chargers, and then he makes his decision. Usually if they get out of your building in modern free agency, you've lost them. Not the case. And that's a testament to what the Broncos were pitching and the strength of their proposal, that once somebody's out of the building and they're not being wooed, if you will, they're still interested. But those three players are huge to the Broncos next season. But what was Sean Payton saying about them? Because this is what's weird. They don't do press conferences anymore when they sign these players. So I get this on Twitter a lot. Like, where's the press conference talking about? They don't do them. They don't do them. And so you're left to wait like this gap between the opening of free agency and the owners' meetings, which is essentially 2.5 weeks or so, to hear from the coach. And the players we still really haven't heard from, other than just some real quick snippets on the team website of happy to be here, love the place. Nothing deep or insightful because the brevity of the interview. But Sean Payton sat down at the owners' meetings on Monday. Parker Gabriel was there, and my good friend Dave Althouse. I do stuff every Friday during the season with Fox 31 talking Broncos, and they were kind enough to get me the sound. So it's good audio, clean audio from these owners' meetings of Sean Payton. And I'm not going to play all of it because it's like 36 minutes. As much as you all want to hear that, that's too long in terms of the way we do our podcast. But let's think about just the important stuff. And I want to grab that from the beginning. And you see the headlines over there. He talks about Greenlaw, and I think that's important. He talks about the running back situation, about balancing your current stock of guys versus free agency versus the draft. And listen, it's what we all suspected. It's just not a great free agent class. Now, again, after the draft, could you take a flyer on someone like J.K. Dobbins once you have the leverage of picks in hand? Perhaps. There's no urgency to get into this free agent market for the running backs. It's just not a strong class. It's the exact opposite, folks, at the draft. I think I told you Mel Kiper has 31 draftable running backs or running backs with draftable grades. That's insane. Broncos are going to have, probably 5 or 6 to choose from when they get to 20, when they get to 51. So a lot to talk about there. And then we'll come back. I want to play you the Payton sound, but then I'll come back and do a little bit of stadium talk because owner Greg Penner addressed some of those issues and where that stands. Again, it's down the road. I don't want you to feel like it's around the corner, but they're going to have to make a decision based on the lease, like when they re-up it in a few years. That's the issue, and the timing and how long it takes to do the construction. If you're building a facility, this doesn't happen in a year. These are usually 2-year projects that they take a while, and in Colorado it could be a little different because of the weather. So that's why the stadium thing, you're thinking, well, isn't this like a 2030 issue? In theory it is, but you got to be able to tell them when you're going to re-up the lease, and you also have to be prepared for the length of the construction project. And I want to talk a little bit about that afterward. But let's hear from Sean Payton about the free agent class, about the upcoming draft, about the running backs. And quickly, I want to give you a quick note. Terrence Ferguson, a source told me, did visit the Broncos facility yesterday. Close friends with Bo Nix, grew up a Broncos and Saints fan. So keep an eye on that name. He's not out of it, folks. If they go running back early, then tight end at 51, guy like Terrence Ferguson or Mason Taylor, Navarro from Miami could be in play. But Sean Payton addressed multiple topics. This gives you a feel, Broncos country. What does your head coach feel about these free agent signings? Of course he likes them. He signed them. But how do they fit? What made these guys the guys he was chasing? And it starts with Payton talking about tight end Evan Ingram and the process of getting him signed. Let's hear from Broncos coach Sean Payton at the owners' meetings.
It took a little bit. In other words, the process relative to his visit, other visits, the vision was pretty clear. Obviously we feel like he's someone that can run and give us a passing threat on third down, red zone. I think he's got good body control. I think he's really good when he gets the ball in his hands. So his run after the catch numbers, statistically wise, have been good. But I would say with him, it was a lengthier process where it was kind of like the old days of free agency, where a player would fly maybe to another team, and then usually wouldn't make it to the third team. But it worked out well.
Your top 3 free agents, money-wise, all big-time players, but they all had some recent injury history. How did you reconcile that?
Well, a lot of it had to do with how we handle the offseason, how we handle training camp. And quite honestly, there's a couple of maybe that we would have had a much more difficult time signing had there not been a prior injury. And we felt with those guys there's always that risk evaluation that's measured in, and we felt pretty good about it. And we feel like in our program, we'll be smart enough to understand their workload, all the things to try to get them healthy to the field. But there's always some risk with that.
How did you feel just filling these needs? I mean, you had some significant needs, and boom, 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 you fill them with those three guys that Mark Houston
Yeah, it's not a process where you say, if I don't get this player, then we'll go get this one or this one. You really kind of identify exactly who you're looking to get. I would say we felt good. We felt good coming out of it. We felt like our team got better from a football makeup standpoint, toughness, and we'll continue to hopefully use that momentum as we get closer to the draft and then even after the draft.
Coach, it seems like Evan Ingram's really embracing the Joker role. Does he fill that need for you, and how does he fit with that role that you have?
I would put him in that category, that family. I think that he is someone that has those skill sets. I think one of the things that helped us in the process of him making a decision was that role, and maybe you could talk about it, but then historically speaking, having had players like him, I'm excited.
With Hufanga, what does he bring that was missing last year on the back?
Well, he's a great communicator. He's super intelligent. I think his experience, and there is a toughness about the way he plays. Sometimes you can be a second responder, sometimes a first responder, and he appears first a lot on screen. And there's a style to how he plays. And look, part of that style, because he's so physical and so quick to support, he's had a handful of injuries, but there's a toughness to his game, and you guys will like him. Something about him when you meet him and you visit with him. So that was a big get. We felt excited about that.
Was there a common thread with him and Greenlaw coming over from the 49ers that attracted you to those guys?
I think that was a little bit more coincidence. Yeah, there were positions, they were kind of must positions for us, and yet to fill two of them from one team, and I think one may have helped the other too. Sometimes that can happen, but I can't speak for them. If there is a common thread, though, those two guys are tone setters in how they play.
Sean, this is probably the way you're used to operating during the draft because you had Drew for all those years and your quarterback set. Do you appreciate, because I know you talked about the NFL train, seeing who people think you're getting at 20, knowing how many things can happen before you get there?
I appreciate not being in that quarterback market. It's difficult. We were talking last night, George and Greg. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure to get that right, and when you don't have it right, it's one of those positions where it can kind of consume you as an organization. And fortunately, a year ago this time, we were able to do that. 20. We're just getting into the heart of the meetings now, so the mocks or what have you would be stuff we'll throw into a computer.
How much is running back and how does that compare to looking for that quarterback last year?
Yeah, I would say you can draw some similarities in that, and yet generally it's easier to find that position than the QB. There's just more access to finding answers to that position, and it's much, I think, more challenging at quarterback.
In terms of this year, with the draft so deep at running back, was that maybe one reason you haven't signed a running back at this point in free agency?
Yeah, I think that factors into it, but I also think we felt like it was a pretty lean year in regards to free agency at that position, just relatively speaking. But there is depth in the draft.
When there's a deep position in the draft, maybe take quarterbacks off the board. Does it affect how you approach thinking about getting one? Oh well, maybe in the second or third. That's sort
Yeah,
of thing.
when you're kind of putting this cube together, part of it is understanding what's available in the draft, or what do the odds suggest. It's deep at interior defensive line, for instance. Those things can affect maybe what you do in free agency, and you're looking to click the last click and have it all fit and get the most out of the players you sign or draft. So it would be important to know, as we're making free agent decisions, where the draft is depth-wise at certain positions. That I do think exists.
So how do you feel yours?
It's reportedly the Niners were highly aggressive in trying to retain Greg Greenlaw, given that we agreed to terms with you guys. Is that all fair? In free agency?
It's their player
Yeah.
at that time.
So it's
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, for us, nothing can happen until that Wednesday time frame. And so, man, I'm glad he chose us.
Were you aware in the moment that you agreed with us, but
No, the only discussions that are being had at that time are agent to GM. Like I said, I'm just glad, when the decision was finalized. You wait on a few of these guys, and you don't know all the specifics, but those guys are excited about being in Denver.
He's coming off the Achilles.
Yep.
He plays basically one half of football. Are you at all surprised at the level of competition that you had to sign him?
We thought he was going to be highly sought after. In other words, I think the injuries maybe played a little part as to how he became a free agent. Otherwise, he doesn't ever hit the free agent market. He's someone that's contract is redone. So I don't think I should say nothing surprises you anymore, but we felt like there would be. These guys are young players when you look at their pitch count and their age, and then you study the injuries themselves. I wasn't really surprised that there would be other teams that heavily involved.
Does that have a reflection on the depth of the draft at that inside linebacker?
I would say it's a fair question. I think it's a little bit harder. I don't know that it's draft related. I think it's a little bit harder to say we found a starting inside backer, whether it's a Mike or Will. It's harder to say that about a rookie. There's certain positions that, and that's not to say that a rookie can't come in and do it, but I think it's harder to project that.
Those aren't considered necessarily like premium positions, quote unquote, inside
Correct.
linebacker and
Correct.
safety. But you're saying in terms of veteran presence, especially in the
Right.
middle of the defense,
Yeah.
there's some value in that.
Yeah, from a communication standpoint, I mean, you talked about it. Part of the middle of the defense was DJ.
Yeah.
Right behind him, Trey and Fonga. Right through the middle of our defense, getting tough. And look, the irony is DJ shared a locker room with these guys and knows them very well. And so from a leadership and a football IQ standpoint, that was important.
It's important to have all three of those guys. You should have an easy adjustment period.
Yeah, I think so. I think anytime, it depends on the player. I think, look, the transition always is significant, and yet I think these guys will have a familiarity with certainly some teammates, and then also whether it be coaches. There always seems to be a couple ties in each staff. But we were excited on Wednesday. I'll be honest with you. We felt we got better.
Coach, going back to Ingram, how can he help Bo take that next step? And as you look at Bo, where do you want him to grow going into year two?
Well, I think, look, we've talked about it for 2 years now. The interior triangle of your passing game, the tight end, the running back, the third receiver. When you're seeing a lot of these coverage shell looks, those positions have to thrive. So the very logistical answer to your question is Ingram's closer to Bo than the receivers sometimes. The matchups inside, I think, I just think, man, it's hard to play that position if you're not able to attack the interior triangle of some of the looks we're getting defensively. This, I think, helps Bo.
Welcome back to the Broncos Pod with Troy Renck. I'm your host, Troy Renck from the Denver Post. So I hope that gives you a feel. Again, we heard from Coach Payton about the fit with tight end Evan Ingram, filling these needs through free agency, what he thinks of Talanoa Hufanga, of course, then, and Dre Greenlaw, these players. It gives you at least a better idea of how he sees the fit. It was interesting with Talanoa. He talked about him. And this is one of the reasons how they changed their safety position last year, folks. They wanted their safeties playing downhill. They wanted them lighting up guys like the Vegas Strip. They wanted aggressiveness. They did not want, the Justin Simmons center fielder anymore, who has great value. They wanted a guy to come up, lay the wood, be part of a physicality of playing kind of just in-your-face style. And Brandon Jones did that last year. Caused some fumbles, got some picks. And you listen to that answer about Talanoa Hufanga from Payton. You got first responders and second responders, guys who get to the scene. And and we're not minimizing what those people do in real life. So understand that it's an analogy that this guy is first at the scene, at the point of the attack, at the tackle. It's part of the reason he gets hurt a lot, frankly. He gets up and he's not walking up to the pile. He's the one creating the collision. He's a guy, when he's right, you're exchanging insurance papers with. And Greenlaw is no different. He plays with a ferocity that is palpable when you watch his highlights. I mean, you can feel it. He had the huge hit against the Seahawks a couple years ago. And again, part of this is health. Can these guys be healthy? Because they play a very physical, aggressive style. But if they are, they're that kind of missing piece type players that takes Broncos from being a good defense to a great defense, especially in the middle of the field. They were very good statistically, certainly with 63 sacks, dramatically improved against the run. But when you get against the better teams, that's the next step here. The Broncos absolutely boxed the ears of bad teams last year. Nothing wrong with that. That's how you become a good team, is you always beat bad teams. But if you're going to become an elite team, now you have to beat those teams. Can they do that? And that's where the players like Talanoa, like Dre Greenlaw, like Evan Ingram can make a play in space, can go win a one-on-one in the biggest moment. That's how you become elite, folks, where you're not scheme dependent, where you just have a guy that, hey, go make a play. That's how it was when I covered the Broncos in the 90s. They were very team-oriented, but it's like, Terrell, go make a play. Shannon Sharp, go make a play. John Elway, go make a play. When you start getting to that point where you're really solid everywhere, and then you say, have instances 2-3 moments a game where your best players take over, now you got something. You get a feel, too, for the running back. Like, listen, the running back situation is such that they're just not a lot in free agency. We know the tight end possession is going to help Bo Nix. That's certainly going to be part of it. But in terms of the running back situation, and Sean Payton talked about this multiple times during this, but excuse me, you got to find a guy who fits. They preferably like someone that can play all three downs and they can play in the passing game. I wrote about this on Sunday in the Post. Again, this idea that it's not just a running back. They need the right running back. Sean Payton's only had, folks, 3,000-yard rushers in 17 seasons. He's not looking for a bell cow. So all of you that think, he's going to get a bell cow. He's not. It's not his nature. But he needs a guy that's capable of being on the field for 3 downs. Like, he needs his Alvin Kamara, if we're being honest. If he gets his Kamara, their offense is going to be look like there's no tomorrow. And yes, I purposely did that pun. It's that difference maker. Kamara, in his best years, was like 960 yards rushing, but he was such a force in the passing game. I mean, you're talking about a guy that's getting, 4 or 5 touchdowns a year in the passing game. Javonte Williams last year, 0. Averaged 8.2 yard carries a game, the worst among starting running backs. 513 yards, the worst Payton's ever had from a leading rusher in his coaching career at the NFL level as a head coach. All that's got to change. It's just not good enough. So is that Omarion Hampton at 20? Is that Quinshon Judkins at 51? Is that Travion from Ohio State? You're going to have to take him at 20. That's a reach for me. Is that him at 51? Is that Caleb Johnson? Because you see something on film that he could actually be a receiver out of the backfield. He's not just a big guy who's just going to get the tough yards. So, I mean, keep an eye on all of that because it's very important as they move forward. As they move forward, they're going to have a back that's dynamic in the pass game. Now, Payton was quick to say hasn't given up on the current guys there, but they're not all going to make the team. They love Jaleel McLaughlin's work ethic. They certainly haven't given up on Audric Estime. I do think part of Estime's, when I look back at it now, he was so young. I think he was 20 when he was drafted. He turned 21, I believe, during the season. I do think a year of being a professional could help him. And then he got hurt, remember, last year during the OTA part. So could he be a guy that could figure into it and complement a Travion Henderson? Perhaps. But between Blake Watson, Jaleel McLaughlin, Tyler Bidet, and Estime, I mean, I would say, again, 2 of those guys make it, and then you add a young guy, and maybe even you add on the cheap a J.K. Dobbins, but that running back room is going to look dramatically different. And frankly, it has to if you're going to get to where you want to go if you're the Broncos. But they've made strides that way. And I want to finish this up, and we'll have probably more talk about this next week or maybe even later in the week. I got to see what my schedule looks like. Stadium talk. Greg Penner made it clear at the owners' meetings. He always touches on this, and this was the first time that there was a little bit of news here because he mentioned locations. But Greg Penner talked about the stadium issue. And obviously he's pleased with free agency. He has a relationship with Bo Nix, sees him every day in the facility. I would have you go back and read my column in January when I had a long sit down with Greg Penner about, how we don't let traditions stand in the way of progress. We identify needs, we attack, we're always looking to get better. That's who he is. He loves that he sees that in Bo Nix, that this kid's never satisfied, that eats and sleeps football. It's not his only thing in life, but it's certainly so important that it's easy to see him getting better. And when you think about Penner and getting better, he sets the tone. He really does. And the stadium issue is one I know it's of certain concern with fans, but it's because of the fact Broncos downtown have just been magical. Mile High Magic, all the comebacks, the John Elway era. The idea of it moving from there is jarring. It's jarring. But can they stay there and maximize the future of the franchise in terms of building around it, making it a year-round facility, a destination place? I mean, that's hard because you're a little landlocked there geographically. But if you go to these other places, what that looks like. So I want to read you his thoughts on the stadium plans. This is Greg Penner, he was asked at the owners' meetings on Monday where the team is regarding future stadium plans. And this is, and I quote, "We're continuing our diligence. As I mentioned before, it's complex. We haven't ruled anything out. We're still looking at the current site, other sites around Denver, Lone Tree, Aurora. We don't have a set timetable for making a decision. We obviously have our lease that ends at a certain date, which is a date that we could focus on. It could be something that could happen earlier than that. If we needed to, we could be in our current stadium longer. So we don't have to set a timetable at this point." He went on to say, "We're really focused on what's the next best option long term. We're thinking and we want to create what's the best option for the next 40 or 50 years, not the next 10 or 20 years." So that's important. And maybe that's why, the yards, and you can go back and read our stadium project that was published in the Post in December. Parker Gabriel did a great job of laying this out. While the yards over there, I think off Santa Fe, like that could be in play as a downtown location to keep it there with land enough to build around it and make it. You're seeing it with the new women's soccer stadium, how they're going to put in the soccer stadium and make it a place to go during the year. I mean, that's the modern sports facility. And, there's other questions to be asked as well. Do you want a retractable roof? Because if you do, could you get Final Fours here? Could you even be play for a Super Bowl if you're a Broncos with a retractable roof? So I'm not crazy about that. I'd certainly understand it from a business perspective. I like the games outside. But, again, I don't sit outside. I'm in the press box. It's easy for me to say that, but it's old school football. It's Denver football. You're in the cold, you're in the weather, you're in the elements. Fans are going nuts. That's what I grew up watching in terms of Broncos football. So we'll see where it all lands. And then finally, good news, and I know from the folks that listen to this podcast, Broncos Country, is that they can wear their throwback jerseys now up to 4 times. So that means we're going to see those 1977 classics that they wore against the Raiders last year. Could wear up to 4 times. If it were me, I'd wear it for all AFC West home games. Be a non-starter. We're wearing it for those, but they won't be that cut and dry. But the good news is you could see these classics, the 1977 classics, as much as 4 times next season. So that's fantastic. And finally, regarding the schedule, remember, the Broncos played 2 Thursday night road games last year in New Orleans and in the Chargers. So they're going to get a Thursday night home game this year. And the NFL changed the rule that they can only need 21 days to flex out of a Thursday night. And I apologize for that, fans, but because Broncos fans, a number of you got screwed last year that were going to the Chargers game. But the reality is they don't care. I wish I could tell you that you could send a bunch of emails and they'd hear your voice. All they care about are TV eyeballs. They don't care about the people in the stands. So, but the Broncos got flipped out. That rule last year was 28 days notice. Now it's 21. Just letting you know so you know and file that away. But I don't think it's going to be an issue for you, Broncos country, because they are owed a home game, a Thursday night home game. And the final part of that is that the Broncos have made it clear, according to Damani Leach, the president, they're interested in going to Berlin to play, which they could play the Colts as the visiting team. So Broncos, Sean Payton loves those trips. He didn't initially in his career going to London. He feels now it helps galvanize a team. It gets him away, kind of creates that collegiate field, us against the world, us against everybody, and they bond over it. And he saw that last year when they went to the Greenbrier in practices leading up to the Jets game. And he sees the same type of vision going to Berlin, to Germany. So keep an eye on that. The schedule's announced, I think, late April or the first week of May. But Broncos very possibly could be playing in Berlin next year. Folks, I could not do this podcast if it weren't for your support, number one. And secondly, the support of Nate Lundy at Mile High Sports, Danny Bailey, producer behind the screen. He is the best. And my folks, my sponsors, Darby Hoggatt from Hoggatt Injury Law, A1 from day one. You see that logo there. Darby's the best. If you need somebody, tell him I sent him your way. He is the best. So keep an eye on that. And BetOnline, our new sponsor, thanks to them. Broncos Country. I do this podcast for you. Happiness, that starts with me. Go out there and have a great day.